Welcome to Physiological Principles. This is a 14-week module and we'll be covering normal physiology. That normal physiology will relate to your clinical practice and it will help to underpin any ongoing learning, whether that be on the course or within your clinical practice. On the course, we will pick it up again when we look at pathophysiology and clinical reasoning. And it will also come in very useful with non-medical prescribing. The total study time for this module is 200 hours, and working that out on a calculator, it works out at just over 14 hours a week. Now, some of you may need to spend more time than that. This depends on your prior knowledge, really. Due to dear old SARS-CoV-2, this time will be spent mainly engaging with video lectures and self-directed study. There will be some, weekly live interactive sessions, but the onus is going to be on you to engage with self-study and the video lectures. With this in mind, your engagement with the module will be monitored via Moodle, and also your attendance at the live sessions. And please note that the expected attendance is 80%. In normal times, that normally relates to you can miss 2 sessions, but I seriously wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so hopefully by now you've had an email with links to 3 videos preparing you for the module. If you haven't, those links are available on this Moodle site. Those 3 videos are also encompassed within a single handout, and that has exactly the same material. And it's designed for people who like to learn from text, or you want to have a handout that you can take notes from. So those links are available on Moodle as well. If you haven't started it, please do start it. It is expected and highly recommended that you've completed that before you start week 1. There is also a quiz attached to it, so that will help you to assess your learning. If once you have gone through the material, you believe that you can recall that material, try the quiz. If your score is low, you obviously need to go back and have another go at learning that information again. Which brings us on really to study skills. Now, study skills, there's a whole section on this Moodle site on study skills. And it's a key thing of this module that students always say to me, I understand it when you go through it, but I can't remember it. And that's the problem. And this is where really you have to go back to basics. You have to go back to traditional study skills. On Moodle, you'll also see there's another handout called Mobilizing Memory. And that's starting to get you down the physiology line, because in that there's information about the processing pathways within the brain. And it's been shown that if you use multiple different methods of input, you get stronger memories because you're activating lots of different pathways at the same time that all make substantial, recallable memories. So in terms of traditional study skills, this takes time. You can't learn something or recall something if you read it once, unless you're very, very lucky. So it takes time. Now, time can be managed. It doesn't have to be a whole day sitting at your laptop or your computer or with your notes. It's probably better that you do break it up. But also you can utilize those odd moments when you wouldn't be doing anything else. So having portable notes is a good idea. because you can use that time waiting at the bus stop, on the bus, waiting for a urinalysis to cook, to at least get a few facts read. So use your time wisely. One technique when you are trying to learn is to keep moving up and down. So don't think that you have to stand still or sit down to learn. Make your own notes and diagrams, as we said, ideally more portable forms, but I have had students, you can get on you can buy static rolls of whiteboard, and you can put these on your walls at home. I had a student actually used her bathroom tiles to draw diagrams on. So you have these around the home so you can see them all the time. But making your own notes in your own words is part of developing one of those pathways. Another key thing, and a thing a lot of students struggle with, is terminology. So start right from week 1. All of these things that you need to do from week 1. Otherwise you'll get left behind. One of the things that might be helpful is keeping a glossary. We're going to learn a lot of new scientific terms. So if you have a glossary, on one side you have the word, spelt correctly, hopefully. On the other side, you have a definition. And what you can do with that is cover each side separately and either say, oh yes, that's the definition of, or that definition means such and such. So it's quite useful to have a glossary. The key thing when you're learning it is to chunk it down. It's that old adage of chunking stuff down makes it more manageable, more memorable. So chunk each bit down, repeat, repeat, repeat until you are able to recall it without your notes. So you then cover your notes up and you go, oh yes, da-de-da-de-da. I can remember that. Check with your notes you got it right though. And then work your way down. So if we have a process and there's various phases, learn one phase, learn the next phase, learn the next phase, until you can cover your notes and recall the whole process in one lump. And do that, check that a day later, but also several weeks later. And by checking it, you're also reactivating those memories. Another key technique really is repeating something in your head. Again, if you've got nothing else to do, you're walking the dog around the park or something, go through something in your head, pretend you're teaching it to someone, and then eventually, ideally, what you need to do is start teaching it to someone, because that's the best way of consolidating all those memories. So you need to be doing all of these techniques every single week so that you can recall the material of that week before we move into the next week. Hence, it takes quite a lot of time. Although there is a reading list for the module, because we have to have a reading list, and in some cases students do like to have a look at textbooks or have textbooks to hand to learn other things that come up in clinical practice. For the purposes of this module though, it's not necessary to use those textbooks. If you never open one, I don't mind. The danger also, if you do open them, is, and I've often found this, you want to know a fact. You read several pages and you get right to the end and they haven't actually told you that fact. So textbooks can mean that you end up drowning in lots of irrelevant information that you don't need, and they can be quite vague in their explanations. So be wary of textbooks. To this end, the lecture notes that you're given, the lecture notes that you have all the detail that you need. They are designed to cover all that you need to progress in your studies on this course, to give you a general insight into physiology, and also to pass the final exam. So if you never open a textbook, you just use the lecture notes, that's absolutely fine. Another key tip about passing this module is your method of writing. There is, in the study skills section again, there's a bullet point sentence. That phrase was actually coined by a student many years ago. A handout. And that's really about, you put things into bullet points, but for the purposes of clarity, I need you to write that bullet point in a full sentence. Otherwise, sometimes you don't quite demonstrate cause and effect and it's not quite clear. So it's a way of converting your bullet points by using simple words at the start and the end into proper sentences that make sense. So there's an example within there, the bullet point sentence example, but also there are previous exam papers, and with those there is an example of a whole set of model answers for one of those exam papers. So have a read through those as well to get the gist of how you should be writing this, because the sort of key things are really, you need to write simple, precise, factual sentence without any vague allusions. Everything has to be almost childlike, really. This does this, that does that, then this happens. So it's really factual, style of writing, nothing waffly. There's also, on this Moodle site, the dyslexia self-assessment checklist. Now, you were, I think, should have been pointed in its direction in terms of your induction. But if you haven't yet had a go at it, please do as soon as possible, because the earlier we can identify if you have dyslexia, the earlier we can get arrangements in place to give you extra help. If you already know you have dyslexia, please contact the LSBU DDS team. Again, there's a link on here to get to them as soon as possible to get your support arrangements officially recognised. You do need a support arrangement form produced by LSBU to get them at LSBU. Which brings us on to assessments. There is one exam, so it constitutes 100% of the marks for the module. There's no other assessments that go to make up your mark. The pass mark is 50%, but if you get a 0.5, which often happens, it is always rounded up. So if in the exam you get 49.5, that constitutes a pass because it will be rounded up to 50% and 50% is a pass. The exam itself is divided into 3 sections, and I've switched these around slightly. Those of you more observant people may notice from the example exam papers. I've switched these around so it now starts with the multiple choice questions. So there's 2 sets of 10 multiple choice questions, and that accounts for 20% of the exam. There's then a block of missing word text, which is formatted slightly differently, but the effect is the same on an online exam, and that's worth 10%. So between the multiple choice and the missing word, that constitutes 30% of the exam. You only need another 20% to pass from those essay style questions that are the third part. So you have 7 10% essay style questions. So they're quite short essays. And this is where your precise, clear writing style comes in. So because there's 7 of them, they amount to 70%. But you actually, if you get everything right on the first 2 sections, you only need 20% out of that. So it's in 3 sections, 3 different styles of question to help you. The campus-based exam, so if we do it in a big hall in a normal exam style, it's 3 hours. Plus, if you have dyslexia, the usual extra time is 25%. So you get extra time if you have dyslexia. The online exam, because of it being online, we have added a half an hour. So it's 3.5 hours plus your extra time for dyslexia. To prepare you for the exam, you have 5 mini mock exams. Again, they're online at the moment, so it gets you also used to the idea of doing an online exam. So our first one is in week 3, and that's an essay style, 10% essay style question. Should take you about 18 minutes. So the essay style question in week 3 will be your first mock. You will get plenty of feedback on that, and if in any of the mocks, if you get less than 3 out of 10, apart from the multiple choice, then you get an opportunity to redo it, and it's highly recommended that you do, to make sure you learn that. Each mock, so week 3, week 5, another essay style, week 7 is a missing word style, week 9 is essay style again. Each of those cover the topic material either from the start for week 3 or from the previous mock. So they do encourage you to learn the material as you go through. The final multiple choice mock is really going to be an overview of all you've learnt. So it will give you an idea there about breadth rather than depth of your learning. The mocks are always highly evaluated by students. It's a bit of a Marmite thing. They don't especially enjoy doing them, but they really, really appreciate the value of them in preparing them for the exam. So they are highly recommended. And it is very noticeable that students who do engage with those mocks and who resubmit if they have a low mark have a much stronger chance of passing the exam. There's a strong correlation with success in the final exam. Which leaves us with some general notes.